Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to another Tuesday night chat. Sorry I was a little bit late getting everything started. I worked over a little bit and it threw me everything behind. So, but I'm here. We're here. We got a few good subjects I know to talk about. A couple of things we're going to bring up. But until then, let Luke and Rosie do an intro, and I'm going to start with you, Luke.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Hello, Rosie. How are you? It's good to see you again. And TR, of course, fantastic. Yeah, and hello to everybody on the outside, certainly. Lots going on. Lots going on for sure. So, yeah, I've been just kind of dabbling around a few chats lately. And like I said, there's lots to talk about. So I'm probably doing quite a bit of listening tonight, I'd say. So, yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Anytime you want a link, you just let me know, Luke. Anytime. And Rosie, would you like to go ahead and do your intro, and then whatever's on your mind, you just go ahead and run with it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to fix this up. It looks like my cam has kind of gone a little crazy over here. I've been having some problems with YouTube. Just give me half a second. Hey, everybody on the side chat. Nice to see you. Rosie O'Kelly here. And there is a lot going on in the world right now, especially the economic world. It's probably not escaped a lot of people's notice. Let me close. Boom. There we go. Anyway, Luke, great to see you on as per usual, and TR, great to see you again too. I haven't really put any updates on the Rosie Murphy channel, which I traditionally use to update economic things, because we have been in a consolidation formation within a lot of the markets for the past better part of the last 2 months, since that horrendous slide that we had in, I think it was January, February, about 3,000 or so Dow points in a very, very short period of time. And it took the starch out of a lot of the momentum that was going on in the investment world, momentum that had been in place since November of 2016 when the president was elected. Basically, we went from about 18,000 on the Dow Jones Industrial Average to 26,000, almost 27,000, without hardly a stopping point, much less a meaningful pullback along the way. So as a result, there was a feeling that the market could be, in a lot of ways, could be potentially overextended in that fast and that rapid a rise. And I sort of stood of the opinion that that was really the capping, the end stone, the capstone on a rise that had been taking place effectively since August of 1982. The reason I know that is I remember that being in finance class for my MBA and riding home. You guys aren't even going to believe this when I tell you these figures, but riding home and listening on the radio that the Dow had climbed 33 or 35 points in a day. It was almost unheard of at that time. But of course, we were at the 777 level at that time. So that was a big move, 5%. It kicked off something that's basically lasted ever since then, in my opinion. And we had to go through all of the various mini crashes, the crash of 1987, when we lost about 23% in a couple days. Then we had the telecom crash of the 90s, and then we had the real estate meltdown of 2005 through 2008. And in response to them, the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury have had to become much more proactive and reactive in what they're doing to try to help the economy here. We had quantitative easing 1, 2, and 3, which basically was massive buybacks of retiring and purchases of bad debt to clean up the books of a lot of Sallie Mae and some other large lending institutions. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury were willing to take massive amounts of sketchy debt in and basically reliquefy a lot of the big banks and prevent them from having massive problems as a result of the collapse of Bear Stearns and the near collapse of Merrill and Bank of America. There was a lot of bad things that happened there, with the result that we've spun up a lot of debt here, something on the order of $40 trillion of debt. That's a massive, massive amount of money. And I think people go along a lot of times in markets and investing in economics, and as long as the house isn't immediately falling down on them, then everything's okay. You know, as long as the financial house doesn't appear to be crashing, then everything's okay. But the reality is something different if you see some of the reports that come out about the state and local levels and some of the pension problems that they're facing in Illinois and California with guaranteed rates of return of 8% on a lot of these obligations. The amount of the obligations that so many state and local governments are under, and the United States government are under, have almost reached the point that they're starting to defy credibility in the markets. And I'm going to drive this all home by saying this. Interest rates are rising. Commodity prices are rising. Okay, very important thing. Interest rates are rising. The 3%, the 10-year note, the 10-year loan to the United States government, the United States Treasury, reached 3% today for the first time since 2014. Now, why are interest rates rising? And this is the real crux of the situation. And this is where the Federal Reserve is almost like in Las Vegas right now with their tightening. They can either bet on red or black. If they bet on red, they keep raising rates because they think interest rates are rising because of a strong and robust economy. But if they bet wrong and black comes up, then interest rates are rising because of risk, with a perceived risk within the system, the worldwide economic system. And therefore, it's beyond the Fed's control to even really affect interest rates anymore. And what we may be witnessing is on the verge of a melt up of interest rates here that could have dramatic results and impact on all of the investment markets here. So this is why I say it's almost like the big roulette wheel. The Fed has to guess correctly. In 1929, the Fed guessed incorrectly. They did not see a slowing economy in 1929. They saw a speculative blow-off in stocks. They saw a rapid expansion. Well, it was cooling by 29, but all through the 1920s, there had been an enormous surge in consumer installment credit to buy dryers and early, radios and early labor-saving devices, vacuums and things like that. But when it came time to see that the economy was actually really slowing down, the Federal Reserve was fighting the last war. They were fighting what they thought was an overheating economy, when in fact what was happening was an overheating investment market that was taking place with stocks being bought on margin. So at that time, they made a real fatal mistake of raising interest rates in the face of a declining economy and exacerbated that crash of 1929 and probably had some serious implications for kicking off the Great Depression. They have to be very careful now. They have to be very observant to see if things are really that strong. And you look at some companies and they're doing well, but then you look at the competitive pressures that are affecting major industrial lines like General Electric, and you look at companies like Procter & Gamble that are enormous in consumer products, consumer staple goods, and they're under terrific pressure because the competition is so fierce and it's so hard to grow markets now, and it's so hard to get price advantages. So the point is that things could be a lot dicier out there than the Federal Reserve thinks it is in terms of economic growth and prospects. Now with this trade friction with China and these tariffs beginning, and as much as Trump and President Xi tried to down talk that, and put lipstick on it, it's still a pig at the end of the day, and it's going to be a lot of friction between these two countries. So we come back to that same thing after this big consolidation for a couple months. Are we going to take off again and fund some final speculative blow off? Or are we going to crack hard to the downside here and rapidly go back down to 18,000 where Trump was elected? I'm so kind of leaning still towards the latter now. We haven't had a severe breakaway, but we're having these very wild days of 300, 400, 500 point ranges. There's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of people that are starting to move the boat back and forth, running one way and then the other. And I just fear that we may end up capsizing here in the face of this, in the face of all of this volatility. So we have to be very careful about interest rates in here. We have to understand that interest rates don't just rise because of demand for money. They also rise because of perceived risks of lending at that time, when lenders demand more of a return because they fear they might not get their money back. So they start to demand higher and higher rates. So that's about all I have. If anybody has any questions on the side, I mean, there's a lot of other things to choose. Yeah, we kind of did a false breakout, Linda, Francine, on this triangle that we've been building since January. We had to throw over to the upside. I don't want to get into a lot of technical stuff, but then rolled down into a big, we've gone down about 500 or 600 points since then. So we have to be very careful. This market could break very, 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 very rapidly here, because the volume has been drying up over the last 3 months, signaling a huge consolidation here. So I don't want to get technical, but let's just say I'm glad I'm out of the market, and I'm glad I've continued to short some of the big stocks. I do have active short positions. I added one in Apple, and I've been short Tesla for the better part of on and off for about 5 months. So.
Okay, I got a question. So this is a Canadian point of view here, certainly what's going on in the States. And you said you weren't going to get technical, but just to let you know, half that was pretty technical for me. Anyway, I still understood it. But half of it was pretty technical. So thank you for not going technical. Otherwise, you would have freaking lost to me. But more importantly, I guess, is what a few of us Canadians, certainly, people that I know, we were talking, we're thinking, okay, so what's going on with the trade? Because to understand that more, and the only thing I could think of, I said, well, maybe they're basically trying to attract more business to come back to the States, stay in the States by having these high tariffs or whatever the case is, or even bringing in imports or whatever the case is. But if we could attract business to come back, so is that one aspect of it? And the other one, is it like kind of double dipping to some extent, saying if the businesses come back here and they still have to import product, they're still going to get, so we get the business and we keep the businesses. And then, of course, and there's also a tariff put on imported goods, especially some of the higher tariffed items. So is that the approach? And is that how they're thinking about, if not fixing the country, stabilizing it?
Well, I think I hate to say this, but the president's taken a very simple-minded approach. He probably tells his trade secretary, bring me a list of trade items, trade imbalance items from China, Mexico, Korea, Japan, and Canada, Germany, France, the big industrial companies. Give me a list of how bad our deficit is in some products and if we have a surplus in other products. Now they get to Canada, right? And what do they look at for Canada? One of the biggest imports we have for Canada is gigantic imports of lumber. And especially now when we're rebuilding, Houston was terribly damaged by the flooding. We had terrible fires in Northern California that just destroyed thousands and thousands and thousands of homes in a 6-hour period. So the demand for lumber is very strong. So of course that surplus, that trade deficit on lumber is going to look very bad right now, because you have companies like Home Depot, Georgia Pacific. You have all these Georgia Pacific and Weyerhaeuser all trying to source tremendous amounts of lumber from Canada now to meet demand. But on paper, it looks bad. You know, that imbalance looks bad. And I'm afraid our president looks at that imbalance and says, you know what, let's slap a tariff on that. But what we're kind of doing, Luke, is we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here, too, because we're hurting our ability to rebuild rapidly and to put up and expand housing in this country by starting to choke our imports of things like lumber, because Canada has a dollar at 73 cents to the US dollar. So it's very economical to import lumber. It helps Canada too. You know, it creates jobs in Canada. And we have to be very, very careful. We don't hurt allies too in this thing. And I think we risk that with a lot of these tariff wars. Great neighbors like Canada, they don't grow on trees, you know, and pardon the pun, but I really think we have to be extremely careful of our trades and tariffs here. They're adding to a lot of this fear and uncertainty in the market right now. It's scaring people a little bit because they remember what happened in the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley tariff that Hoover brought in. It basically wrecked international trade throughout the 1930s and deepened the depression. So, yeah, we have to be very, very careful here. And I don't think that Trump takes a very simple approach to things, where I think traditionally before Trump, we took a more diplomatic approach to tariffs. Well, we're a wealthy country. We can afford to give up a little bit to keep Korea strong in the face of North Korea. We can help Japan rebuild after World War II. We can buy more from Taiwan to keep them strong in the face of the People's Republic of China. And Canada is a great neighbor to the north, a great ally. So, you know, we can afford to take one for the team a little bit. But I think Trump wants to possibly even up things too quickly here. And I think that's going to cause a lot of friction and financial fallout. You know, I have some friends in Western Canada, Alberta and other things, and they're complaining now about how things are very slow in those provinces and right now. So I don't know how you feel, Luke. But.
Well, I mean, I haven't really heard from anybody, certainly with the trade aspect of it, or how that's really affected us. I think there has been certainly a negative effect to some degree. The uncertainty, I think, is, from what I've gathered anyway, is only that when are we going to reach agreement, and what will be the finer points to the agreement, and how will it affect us? What does the states mean exactly? We haven't been getting a fair deal. First and foremost, you talk about lumber. It's one of the biggest commodities we certainly ship south, but we're also not just shipping you garbage. We're shipping you our best lumber. And you can ask anybody in the construction business up here. We keep the shit and we send you guys grade A lumber, you know? So, I mean, I don't know. And again, to me, it's like, it doesn't really matter what he does. Maybe I'm wrong. You can correct me, but I'm not so sure it matters what Trump does, in the sense that we're so global now that it's not like you guys are not going to be able to find a supplier. It's always going to happen. You're always going to get one, and you're probably going to get a good deal. It just makes it so that you open the market up a little bit more. Maybe that's not quite accurate, though.
Well, I see that in the sense you're kind of saying it's a zero-sum game. If the U.S. doesn't get it from us, China will get it from us, or somebody else will step in and buy it. But you have to understand there's also that transportation and close border market. There is a very great thing between two companies, as opposed to shipping lumber to China or something like that, and all the humidification, and by the time it gets there, it's water saturated with humidity. You know, there's all kinds of problems with shipping that. But my fear is that Canada tends to be a very resource-based economy, oil and lumber, mining, metals, and that type of thing. And they're the kind of things that seem to really be under a lot of pressure. They're like the low-hanging fruit that Trump can kind of grab and say, well, we can cut down the lumber that's coming. But you start to hurt you start to take away Canadian jobs. And even though they might be able to get it from somewhere else, send it somewhere else. It might take a year or two to get those markets into place. And by that time, their markets may be very weak and not in a position to demand any lumber. So To me, it's like one of those houses that they build out of toothpicks or something. You know, it's all good while it's standing, but you remove the wrong toothpick, and the whole fucking thing just comes down and just collapses on ground level. So we have to be very careful. You know, how we redo trade here. Everybody wants fair trade, but how fast do you want it to happen, and how painful do you want it to be? So.
Well, I don't see how we've been unfair to the United States. First and foremost, United States and Canada, from my understanding, certainly, we both face the same foe of losing industry to Mexico, right? Because we lose industry, we can't blame you guys because they're just actually passing through you guys to get to Mexico. We've lost countless businesses that way, but then we've also lost businesses to the United States. So, I mean, I think I don't know if I don't think it's us. I don't believe
No,
that
I tend to agree.
fair deal.
I'm just concerned the president, like they said, they bring him in that sheet that shows all the trading countries and it shows the pluses and minuses. You look at that and say, whoa, we have a 80 billion, we have an $8 billion lumber deficit with Canada. What the hell? Let's fix that, Ron. You know, do something about that tomorrow. You know, let's slap a 50% tariff. Well, there goes the Canadian lumber industry because maybe 60% of their offtake goes to their production goes to the United States. They just have to be very careful. There's a lot of moving parts on the board here, and I just think the president has to consider all aspects of that when he's thinking about this trade policy. I don't think it's simplistic. It's just slapping a tariff on because. One of the things that's happened to the United States and TR, we've talked about this before, is kind of the hollowing out of our industrial bases here. We've lost a lot of jobs to China. We've lost a lot of jobs to Japan, to Korea, to Taiwan. We're losing jobs to Vietnam now and other Asian, even some developing nations in Eastern and Southern Europe there are getting more industrial. We became more service oriented, producing services and developing a service economy. But my fear is at the end of the day, we'll find out that services are just a luxury on top of either borrowed money in great quantities or productive economies that produce something. In other words, being able to eat out more or being able to have more convenience and being able to have groceries delivered to your home or being able to vacation more or travel more. That's all service industries, travel, tourism, and so many countries and so many economies now and micro economies in the United States, they're built on tourism now. But to have that, you really have to have a productive layer of producing something. You can't just borrow money and keep heaping on debt and just buy temporary prosperity. What we've done is borrowed more money. As our good jobs have disappeared, our borrowing has increased dramatically to a point where we mistakenly believe we can afford, fancy hairdressers and $10 cups of coffee and dinners out every week and Grubhub delivered to you. I mean, it's just, it could be a fast fall down to reality, is my point. The service sector could just collapse in a huge heap and very rapidly here as people see. That's kind of the frosting on the cake and not the cake. I mean, that's like a luxury tier on our economy, but it's not hard producing like the Asian economies, producing and getting money, cash money in return for a finished product. We're just shipping out raw materials and things like that, and our basic industries have shrunk so much. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just feel like the service economy rose hand in hand with deficit borrowing and massive deficits and debt accumulation.
Wasn't it? I can't remember which one it was. It could have been junior, could have been senior, but pretty sure it's one of the Bushes was doing a speech or a talk or whatever. And I remember it well because I live in the deep South or in the South. And that's when the textiles dried up because they literally, I don't remember what they done, what bills they passed or something. And he actually said we need more high-tech jobs, basically service jobs. You know, we need more engineers and this and this and this, and we don't really need these ancient things like textiles. I mean, you might not have said that exactly, but I remember when the textiles dried up in the South, you know, and yeah, we exported a lot of our jobs and went more service oriented. And like you say, I mean, we're not. I mean, we're still producing stuff, but we're not producing stuff like we used to.
Well, let's look at healthcare. The drivers of healthcare until the Great Society was born under President Johnson. The drivers of healthcare were individuals with small individual insurance like Blue Cross, Blue Shield. Usually, sometimes, you know, if you work for a major manufacturer like Western Electric or you know, Bethlehem Steel or one of the big corporations, you were lucky you got health care. But there wasn't a big government pouring of funds into that healthcare sector. Therefore, it grew at a natural sort of rate with the economy. It got no more of a leg up than any other industry in the economy because it could only survive on what we were productively earning and able to pay for health insurance, right? You had to either take it out of your own pocket or you were lucky enough to have insurance. So that kept a real cap on the cost of healthcare because there was no government money involved in that. Only in the most indigent kind of cases was there money available. When money started pouring in, the cost of healthcare started soaring upward. Why? Because there was this massive influx of borrowed money through United States deficit spending and new programs that were put in. So all of a sudden it drove up the cost of healthcare for everybody in this country. And then we started this mad scramble in this vicious cycle of, well, we don't have enough. We need to put more into it. Well, it's getting bigger now. More people are coming into the system. Yeah, because we're expanding it. So government's taking care of more and more of the cost of healthcare. And government knows no limit to the end of their ability to borrow. So they don't really care. If Medicare or Medi-Cal and Medicaid have to borrow tens, hundreds of billions of dollars to stay afloat, who cares? Only the United States Treasury, and insofar as they're able to sell Treasury bonds and notes to do it. But one day the gig's up and it's over, and things, you know, we've had this. There's a whole industry. Healthcare is the largest growing industry in the Western world, but it's basically a service sector. It produces nothing, but it consumes massive quantities of money. So we grew a big consumptive monster. Yeah, it provides income and livelihood, but at the end of the day, think of how much of that money that funds healthcare comes from the government now, supporting programs and emergency rooms, indigent care, Medicaid, Medicare. It's massive. So, you know, not very productive, but, you know, it's a growth, what they call a growth sector. Same thing happened to education too. When the government, we talked about this, TR, everything the government gets into gets worse, more expensive, more costly, more of an inability to afford college, and it just spirals more and more.
Yeah, well, have they ever come up with a program that was successful? I mean, I ain't saying companies haven't made money off the government, but I'm just saying a successful program, whether it's post office, Medicaid, Social Security.
Well, maybe Luke will agree with me, and maybe you. It's prosperity breeds contempt, and we just feel like we have this linear thinking that, well, you know, what is will always be. We'll always be rich. We'll always be wealthy. So let's throw a few bones to the people that don't have. And then over time, those programs expand, and oh, now we need to borrow money because we can't put the burden on the taxpayers because they'll say no. Imagine, TR, if people had to vote on all these increases in programs. What the hell do you think that they would have done? They would have, hell no, I'm not voting for that. So what do? They borrow the money. You know, so you hide behind the curtain and you borrow the money so the taxpayers don't feel the pain over 40 years, but then you build up a nuclear bomb. It detonates when it all has to be paid back. So I'd no more have a bond or a note or be lending money in this environment long term than you'd have to have your head examined right now.
So, more to that question, then, you say about a nuclear blast. What happens when that? We talk about the fact that the United States or the West is too big to fail in that sense. We've had a gravy train for a long, long while. It hasn't been that way. We've already seen a decline, certainly. So, what at the end of the day, what does that bomb look like? I
That
guess
bomb looks like a sudden recognition that the stock market's weakness is not coming from trade problems. It's coming from a realization that instead of shrinking with a growing economy, the Trump deficits in 2019 are going to move back towards the $1 trillion level. The markets are trying to come to terms now with this reality. What does it mean to borrow an extra $1 trillion on top of the annual shortfalls that we already have? Comes a point where you've sucked up every dollar of available capital. Besides that, your printing presses are printing out. And it's almost like there's the nuclear trigger, because everybody suddenly realizes, hey, these guys got no chance. These guys are they're spending like drunken sailors. They have no inability to service this debt. Plus, China may say, we're pissed off. Okay, we're not happy about the trade kind of thing that's going on there. We're just gonna stop buying. We're gonna ease back on the United purchases of debt in the United States. Interest rates rise, the stock market collapses, and suddenly you're into a prepper state where kind of like every person for himself at that point. And the state and local governments run huge deficits, bleeding red ink. The federal government's bleeding red ink. Interest rates are so high that nobody can effectively borrow anymore. TR, we talked about this with the deficit with the debt that we're financing. It's lucky interest rates were low were declining the last 35 years. Well, they're not declining anymore now. They're on an upward path. So we have to come to grips with this. That's the nuclear thing when bond markets collapse and lending markets collapse.
So you're suggesting then it's definitely possible then. I mean, I've always suspected it is possible, certainly, that the bottom just comes out underneath of it, and we're certainly in a prepping situation. I mean, and again, if I hear it, I'm just across the lake. The U.S. is that way by what? I mean, not very many miles. And there's really nothing except water between us. And I hear it on the AM station, right? You guys have radio announcements, so I'm assuming it's just business. But there must be something to it, though, besides just a business ploy about prepping, because it's on your radio stations down there. Maybe it's just close to the lake that I'm hearing it. Maybe it's not everywhere in the States. But so is it just business, or is it a bit of both?
Think once in a while, Luke, that people see like what happened in Baltimore a couple of years ago when the riots hit the street, and how fast the police presence can disappear from the streets and how fast things can get out of control. I think preppers are very good at looking at the mathematics of the situation and saying, well, it might not happen tomorrow, it might not happen in 5 years, but you can bet your ass probably in my lifetime that this whole debt thing is just going to explode. And when it explodes, the whole system is going to have to be rebuilt. Now, there's a big valley between collapse and rebuilding. There'll be all kinds of new, let's have communism, let's have socialism again, or let's have a new form of techno currency or a Bitcoin. There'll be a lot of ideas floated in there. Meanwhile, people will be pulling back from traditional lending markets like United States government debt and Western and other debt around the world, Japan. It'll probably be the real ascension of China at that point in some of the cash economies. So they'll be calling more of the tune at that particular point. So people prep like us because I think we have a sense in our bones that we're kind of living on borrowed time here with this crazy stuff that we do with debts and deficits. And how much debt can you pile on top before it starts to really take a chunk out of other parts of your budget, like defense spending and and education and health and human services, veterans care. The debt just starts to, it's like a cancer. It just grows and eats up more and more of the dollars that are available. And the Fed can't even borrow fast enough to keep it going. So it's a bad situation. So, you know, like I say, borrowing money is good to a point, and it becomes a terrible thing. It becomes a shackles. It enslaves people.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before, and you know, maybe I have different opinions on things, but for everything I've looked into the Federal Reserve, I mean, basically we're paying off a credit card with a credit card. I mean, it's a never-ending cycle. It's almost like it can't be paid off, you know, because every dollar we get from them has interest tied to it, and that's the money that we're paying them to pay it off. You know, I mean, yeah, you can argue that, you know, with some tariffs, port fees, port taxes, and things like that, that, you know, we can get ahead a little bit here and there, but overall, you're paying your Visa card off with your Discover card.
Well, they showed a chart the other day on CNBC that had the 35 biggest industrial countries, and of those 35, the United States is the only one that's going to be increasing its budget deficit over the next 5 years. So there's something wrong with that picture. Just on the face of it, there's something screwy about that. There's some problem with the machine that you would have to be the only nation that's increasing your yearly deficit instead of decreasing it. So there's talk now that the tax cuts maybe have gone too far. They're gutting too much of the available, you know, they're not feeding enough money into the treasury. So there's a fear now, and you can already see some people talking about it, that maybe the tax cuts were a mistake. I'm not saying they were. They tend to be stimulative over the intermediate term, but to go from a $400 billion deficit to $1 trillion deficit, that's a lot for a market to get its head around when they were used to going. They were hoping that a better economy would bring the deficit down, and now suddenly, you know, we're borrowing money like crazy again.
There's no way to turn this around, though, is there? I mean, we're on this train. Just really no way to. How do you turn around $21 trillion?
Yeah, it's more like 40, 45, more like 40, 45 trillion when you take into account future pension obligations and things like that. You can't turn it around. There's no realistic way to turn it around.
Right. No. So I apologize for the 21 then. I guess that's just face value or what they're kind of putting up front for us to view. But you're right. Even when you're looking at, well, for instance, I was just talking to my friend about this. Certainly, me and my dad, and my friend were having a chat, and you know, I said in Canada, certainly we have our trillions, right, of debt, and we're certainly the most indebted country when it comes down to it per population. So I say, you know, we look at, well, what I owe certainly is like about $20,000 personally to that federal debt. But then I also have a provincial debt that I owe about $17,000 to. And then I have my household debt, right, on top of that. So I'm sitting there going, if you look at everybody, and everybody had to pay their share to actually get this to come down, because, I mean, that's it. Well, it's not possible. So how big can it get before it finally just stops?
Well, I think the ugly part is when the realization comes that you've got to cut, the cuts are going to be deep and hard, and they're going to be dramatic. And there's a lot of people that have been carried along very unproductive elements of our society that are big consumers of government services. Now they have to face the possibility of something they've never seen before in their lifetime. That's a cutback in what they're going to get from the government. They're used to government expanding and giving more. This is what destabilizes the whole system and leads to chaos on the street level. Is you start to have Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Toronto, Occupy Ottawa. You start to have all these protests move. Oh, look at this. The rich guys got rich, And we're getting fucked again down on the ground level here. They're cutting education. You know, our school, our college budget's being cut. It's all being taken out on the backs of the poor and those that can't afford it. So this is, you know, how do you cope with it? It's like Linda Francine said. Traditionally, they inflate the currency. They just make the dollar worthless. In fact, it's like hyperinflation in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, with people pushing around wheelbarrows of Deutschmark to be able to buy a loaf of bread. They just ruin the whole system. And then you give rise to dictators and people like that to come in and just strong men that just take control of the situation and say, you know, this shit's out of control. Capitalism has failed. We need to have a strong leader come in here, and then it's Katie, bar the door. So you do have a good watchdog on the deck, though, and that's gold, because you're not going to be able to inflate too much without gold being very wise to that. That's why I say precious metals are a very good watchdog and preserver of capital, because through history, they've always maintained your purchasing power. And if they start to rise rapidly again, and they haven't gone down, they've built a very big base here for a lot of years, very strong, stable base to have a big advance on. When that starts to really move, that'll be my cue that the game is afoot, as Sherlock Holmes used to say, that things are underway here. So that's like my canary in the coal mine.
I just want to make a comment about a comment that we had in the side chat. Not sure how to pronounce that. Meknuki blood. I'm not sure. Anyhow, here's the question: why do we need the government we have? Why do we need a system like capitalism that allows people to amass horrifically monstrous amounts of wealth and power? And my answer to that is look up capitalism and then look up corporatism. And that's where we screwed up, is giving too much powers to corporations. Long time ago in America, corporations were not allowed, except if they were going to be a benefit to the people. Like if it's a bridge product, a bridge project, or a road, or dam, whatever it was. And they had a certain amount of time, and then that corporation was dissolved. And we changed that. Now, I'm not saying it was the bad thing to do, but I understand where some people come from, where these corporations have so much power, so much political influence. I think we let them have too much power. But that's not capitalism. Capitalism is always the right answer. That's why China's flourishing, because they do a modified capitalism. It's still communist, but they allow companies to grow and make money and stuff like that. Without that, if it was just pure communism, pure socialism, to the 10th degree, they fail.
Well, we see this at extremes of markets, that greed takes over. It's human nature. Greed and fear are the two big drivers of human nature. So when money's easy times are coming and there's not a lot of resistance for boards, for big pay raises, for executives and stock options, and people enrich themselves in corporatism, yeah, because it's a sign of the times. It's like, well, shit, everybody's getting it, and we might as well grab it. Shit, Frank's going to jump ship. If, you know, Luke's going to go over to Pepsi. We're here at Coca-Cola. He's going to jump ship to Pepsi. If we don't give him, you know, a $200 million bonus this year, we're going to lose him. So what do? They step up with a $200 million bonus. Oh, we don't want, you know, Goldman Sachs is going to recruit this guy from Merrill Lynch. We don't want to lose, you know, it's all this kind of, you know, you got these firms like Watson Wyatt out there that watch the market, and they tell corporations what other corporations are paying for comparable positions. And it's like going up the baseball bat, right? You just just keep rising till there's nothing left at the top, and that's just pure greed that drives at that point. But that has a way of flushing itself out too when things collapse. You know, a lot of these guys lose a lot of their assets, and they lose a lot of their paper wealth.
So you can't say though what's just going to come first though in that sense though. I mean, because it could be a collapse that ends up causing a massive uprising from the people, for instance,
Yes.
because they're now starving, and that's again what moves people certainly, and we've seen that throughout history. But the other thing is it could actually be the people, but being slowly dwindled away on resources, or like you said, in Canada, the college, is not being funded now, so when things are not being funded, so the people start to rise up. This could also cause it, is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, it's the cutting back of what they call, we went from handouts to, we took it to the nomenclature of entitlements. Entitled means like you should have that. It's your birthright to have that. Suddenly we talked about welfare and government programs as if they were a birthright, and governments owed that to people. The reality, it's only since the 1930s and anywhere in the world that the government ever really got involved and started to socialistically say, okay, we're going to take responsibility for the individual in society now. So we're going to take care of the lowest individual to make sure he's got health care, make sure there's some housing, make sure there's food on the table. So in subsidizing that, you start to grow a bumper crop of more and more of that because you're subsidizing. More and more people become dependent on government for educational loans, for healthcare, for jobs, for anything that they want to do. The government has a hand in it. Now suddenly the government's ability to raise money and fund itself almost gets guillotined. Boom! It almost comes down sharply, and all of a sudden Trump comes out tomorrow and says, "Well, we can't run $1 trillion budget deficits. We're going to have a balanced budget." Well, holy shit! That means that you're going to have to take away $1 trillion somewhere out of the equation. Now, what are you going to do? Who's that going to fall on? The veterans? Hell no. Defense Department? Hell no. It's going to fall on the people, and that's when they're going to hit the streets, and you're going to have that Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Ottawa mentality again. They're going to be out there bitching and moaning because the big guys screwed them again, and they didn't give a shit about the little people.
I don't think you're going to lose your government in the sense that you did mention before that, then the ideas come out, you know what I mean? Having a communist country or something, changing the government plan, because obviously the last one failed, but you've been kicking that same can down the road for how many years? I mean, maybe there's the prelude to the next, topic in some sense, but I was talking to TR shortly before, even you jumped in there before we went live, and I thought, well, and I never said this to TR certainly, but I did say this on a previous show the other night, and I mentioned TR's video about voting and so on. And I think it's important to vote certainly on as many platforms as you can. But there's also a big part of me that suggests is that, well, does it really matter? Because I mean, they've only got so much money to piss around with. Look, the reality is this: if you had a better half, Rosie, and I had a better half, right? But your better half was in the healthcare system, my better half was in the education system. I know if I vote the left in this time, my better half is going to get a good fucking run, right? Because she's going to get a bump up, but they need it badly for the last 13 and a half years. So we're anticipating when the next election comes that we're going to get that bump up if we get the left in. But you're sitting there going, hang on a second, right? My better half needs that freaking bump up. And they've been waiting a little longer even. I mean, sure, they got a little hand out there of, the last election, but it wasn't anything serious. We need this time. You know what? Not just us, but that the people need this. So you know what? You're an idiot for voting that way. And this is it. Meanwhile, we get along on everything else.
Yeah.
This one point. So does it really matter? Because if it's not, your spouse is going to get fucked. Mine is going to get fucked. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter. You've already got so much money.
Here's the bleed over this into politics, and this is what makes the United States very susceptible to this. Is we do have free elections where people like Bernie Sanders can stand up there and espouse socialism and things like that. And believe me, when things hit the fan here, not if, but when they hit the fan, you can imagine how populist it's going to sound to stand on a soapbox in Times Square and start to rally people. This is bullshit. Once again, Wall Street has done it. We're tired of the greedy. We're going to have a government that's run by the people. We're going to regulate everything. We're going to set people's salary. Man, it's like the 1930s. I mean, people start to get elected for radical platforms because they have a cure for the Depression. Huey Long in Louisiana believes everybody should have an equal income. The guy got a hell of a lot of traction before he was murdered on the steps of the Louisiana State House in 1935. I mean, these ideas really take fire when people are hungry and they feel like they've gotten fucked by the system. Man, they turn out in droves and yeah, well, hey man, that's good. Give it to the man. Get in there, right? Yeah, we should all have equal, we should all have a job. We should all have equal pay. And this is why the United States is very fertile. It could change very rapidly here. It could be 1 or 2 election cycles measured in 8 years when we could have a really, really socialist country, or worse here, fairly elected in this country. Not grabbed like a dictatorship, but fairly elected into offices on state and local congressional levels, people that identify as socialists and even communists, and espouse this populist ideology of a chicken in every pot, and let's make things equal, and let's build a government and an economy that works for everybody and not some of it. So that's we have the perfect pathway in our own system to allow that change. And believe me, if it's nuclear, we will see that type of thing. You will see a very radicalized economic and political policy here.
Well, when we had the Depression, and it might have even started before that, that's when the big push for communism and socialism in America happened. You had so many people hurting, it looked like a good answer. And if we get to that point again where people are hurting enough, well, they kind of curbed that with all the entitlements that we do now. If we didn't have Social Security, food stamps, welfare, Section 8 housing, and the list of other stuff that goes along that the government's funding for everybody, there'd be riots in the street right now.
Well, I'm just saying, Minogue says, uh-oh, you don't know communism and socialism. I know communism and socialism like the back of my hand. I mean, I was a political science major. I know it like the back of my hand. The point is, they're both dismal failures as far as economic success is built on. But the problem is, are you going to tell multiple generations of people over the next 50 years or whatever to rebuild an economy? Well, you're going to have to deal with that, right? You're going to have to, these next 2 generations, you're fucked. Okay, here's a loaf of bread, here's some government cheese. Just make do for the next 50 years while we take everything down to its basic level and rebuild a capitalist economy. People are going to be grabbing for any vine they can, swinging through the forest, trying to, push for recovery. And they'll grab those ideas like communism, like they're fresh off the truck. They're not gonna care that they're worn out ideas from the 1840s or whatever. They're gonna grab that stuff like it's fresh, like it's new meat, and they're gonna say, well, we can make it better. We know why they failed. This is what they did wrong. Let's do this and make it right. And
I don't know, blood out there. I don't know what country you live in or what ideology you're coming from, but socialism, communism, Marxism, fascism is not the people controlling the country. It's still the government controlling it. It's the government controlling the companies, the country, companies, and everything. The people, period. It's not the people doing it.
Yeah, socialism doesn't run itself, Minogue. It takes quote smarter people than us to be in there to push the right levers, right? Capitalism's the only system that runs itself with hands off. Okay, let's be real.
Socialism, yeah, I mean, seriously, and I know Luke remembers when we had anarchists on our chats and talked with them and stuff. And if they would, they never would be honest about it. Sometimes they would. But if you really want people to control the country and the government, we started with a really good system, probably the best that had ever been developed up until that point, and even today maybe. It just got out of hand, it got out of control, and we don't have control of it like we should. But the Constitution, the United States, is probably the closest to a controlled anarchy that there ever was. We just lost control of it. But socialism, communism, Marxism, fascism, all that shit's the same shit. It's just a little bit different avenues of it, but it's all the same thing.
Look, as Minogue says, not Marxist socialism. you act like socialism runs itself, like the invisible hands of Adam Smith. We don't have to control capitalism. What we have to do is control. You want to do better, control greed in the economy. Teach human beings to be less greedy, and maybe you'll get somewhere in life, because people repeat the same mistakes through history because we're only human. We're greedy and we're fearful. The two big drivers of ourselves. You want to change the system, take those two out of the equation. You'll never be able to do it. When you say socialism, socialism by definition is a collective getting together and deciding this is the way that things should be allocated. This is the pay that should be received. It's a social based system where we treat people, quote, as human beings, and we don't have anybody that's allowed to elevate themselves above others economically, unless they pay a very high price, like a 90% income tax rate, like we had in the 50s up through the 60s. That was our way of kind of throttling the big high enders. But don't fool yourself that your every bit is in the boat is communism and socialism just walk hand in hand. And one's communism light and the other's communism. That's it. So.
Is that why China gets on? I might be speaking out of turn in that sense, or not speaking about it correctly, I guess is what I want to say. But because of the fact that we're living at certain standards, and we're used to that, certainly in the West, right? I mean, we live a way better standard than a lot of different countries, certainly, and we're very much used to that, right? To the point where we're entitled, to that. Gaps by our government taking care of things, and it's slowly but surely taking more and more government funding everybody to make ends meet. But eventually that train's going to stop. At least I would suggest it is. The other aspect I'm wondering is China more tolerant? You know what I mean? The people are more tolerant, so it's easier for them to actually accommodate this. And then they got so many people that it's easier to get those people to actually do the work in that sense. And so maybe my better question is, who's the next one? If we collapse in the West, who's the next one to pick up?
Well, who's the strong? I mean, I lived in China for 5 years right after, they opened up to capitalism with Deng Xiaoping. I mean, I was in there almost immediately after Tiananmen Square. And I can tell you what, when you're coming off an economy, you can't fall off the floor, is the old saying. You can only be so low, and then everything is up at that point. China has the advantage of coming off a very cash economy, meaning that if you wanted to buy anything in life, there wasn't any lending, man. You had to have the whole Moloch. You had to have all the cash in your hand. If you wanted to buy a car, you had to have the 35, 50,000 equivalent in your hand to do that. You wanted to buy a house, you had to have the whole thing. So they're not a leverage. They haven't been leveraged like the Western societies have. They haven't borrowed massively to better the standards of their people. They've allowed the people. There's no old age system for retirement. There's no government mandated health care. If you work, you get health care over there if you're in a work group, but they don't fund your education except in certain cases. They're moving more. They have a society that's used to getting nothing from the government, nothing except just misery over 50, 60 years, 70 years of communism. So their expectations, Luke, are like here. They're so low that everything looks up at that point to them. Oh, things are better. Our loaves of, our bags of rice have gotten bigger. Oh, we're getting chicken once a week. There's more stuff in the marketplace. Life gets better. But we've leveraged ourselves through tremendous debt because our people are up here and the government fears that if they go down, if these two meet in the middle, there'll be a lot of miserable people on the top side, a lot of happy people below, but a lot of miserable people here. So by borrowing money, they've created this sense that all is well and we can continue to live up here. But we see that's really a fool's game, because when it's time to get paid, these people will still be cash down here, and they're not going to be as affected. Their currency is going to be stronger, the yuan, because they're a very strong base. They don't have the the international finance problems and the borrowing problems that we have. So I just feel like we're going to be our standard of living is going to just be inflated away by just printing money, and you know, it's just a lot of messes coming up here. This is TR and I always say this is why we prep, right? So we're able to take care of ourselves when you go to the store and there's nothing on the shelf one day because the truck driver's scared to drive down to the inner city stores to deliver the stuff to the stores.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, one other question I had, and I kind of will digress here for a moment, but if this were to happen, you know, a collapse, so to speak, here in the West, moreover the United States, they have something they didn't have back, you know what I mean, in all the decades. Certainly, we've had problems before. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Certainly, the continuity of government that you have now, and certainly your formation of your government certainly is locked into your constitution. So if you look to change that government, does the constitution allow for a dramatic change, I should say, of the form of government you have now? Does your constitution allow for that, or would you actually be, you know, infringing on that constitution dramatically? And then if so, what else could take place then if that was the case? And moreover, that continuity of government, does it matter if there's absolute chaos? All it means is
let's follow it through, Lod. Let's just walk this one through. We get a collapse that happens, a market collapse. We're coming off a very high level. We're very overpriced on stocks and things like we haven't been for my lifetime, at least. All of a sudden, interest rates start to rise, things go to hell, real estate start to decline. Our government allows a cooling off period for change to occur. In other words, when something collapses like that, is everybody immediately fearful in year number one? No. They have hope because they've seen these cycles before. They think the government will come in here and make things better. The Federal Reserve will start buying back debt. The Treasury will start printing money, and everything will be well. But when they find out in year two that interest rates aren't coming down and things aren't getting better, then it's time for elections in Congress, our House of Representatives, every 2 years. So people have been standing up in these 2 years before the election saying, hey, look, shit's bad here. These capitalists, these greedy people are the ones that caused this. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist warrior. Elect me and I'll make things better for you guys. So you start to have more socialists / communists make their way into Congress. Now, after 2 more years, you have a presidential election. Things are likely still bad at that point. And the people in Congress will say, well, we just don't have enough people to be successful with our socialist program. We need a socialist president. We need a more socialist Congress. So maybe by the end of the 4th year, now they have a president that's socialist, like a Bernie Sanders, and now they have a socialist Congress. Well, after the 5th and 6th year, another elections take place. And I think the Depression proved that you could go about 4 or 5 years without really meaningful recovery before people really started to get angry and thought about throwing out the whole system. They thought about that in the 1930s in the United States, dumping the whole system. There were movements to have communism brought into America. There were people begging Roosevelt, just be a dictator. Just forget Congress. Disband Congress. Send them home. Just be a dictator, okay? Just make things better for us. And then, you know, so you follow that path. And then at the point when things don't get better, then people want more radical solutions because they saw that elected officials aren't bringing about recovery. So you start to get more radical ideas of just throw away the whole system, like in the 1930s, have things like technocracy and some of these other crazy ideas. And this is how Hitler rose to power in the 1930s through chaos and all that. So yeah, I say you have like a 5-year honeymoon period, then things could get radical in this country beyond that, where people just start to, government sucks, anarchy's the way. Every man for himself, and grab your ammo, grab your guns, and Katie bar the door.
No possibility for, not that I wanted it, but there's no possibility for. Could it get so bad that there's like a merger? What I mean by a merger is where another country comes in and says, "We'll help you out, but it's going to cost you."
Well,
Or is
could
there
you?
another country
Let me
that's in that
ask you,
position?
you're very politically astute. Could there be a point where we have this supranational thing where we've now superseded countries and they now have quote the new world order where everybody gets together and we have one world currency now? Then it'll be a question of who's calling the tunes. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. You know, to have something like a, because there'll be so many countries affected in the West, and China will be affected too because it's not able to export and get paid for anything. So they'll be, you know, even though they have a big inside base of people to grow on, export markets are still what they built their success on. So they'll be hurting too. So you could see them being at the a party at the table, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to talk about some new world order or something like that. Yeah.
Well, the way that would happen, just like anything else, there'd have to be a major, major catastrophe that affects damn near the entire world. And then they could have people begging for it. And that's how they get stuff done.
Yep. You got your people will beg for it. Yeah.
Just like after 9/11, people begged for the government to take their rights away. They begged for homeland security.
Yeah.
Oh, hell,
Patriot
yeah.
Act.
Tap my phone, tap my computer, read my emails. We got to get these terrorists.
Yeah, the
they
Patriot
gave
Act.
all that away.
Patriot Act. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All that. They'll be begging for that because some politician will say this is the solution to our problem, and he'll get enough momentum. It'll be like a snowball rolling downhill on wet snow. It'll just gather momentum as it goes along, and that'll be it. So I just think Occupy Wall Street was just a little pre-taste of what's to come. So
well, I think people too. I mean, this is a republic, but we do have a constitution. A little off subject, but kind of on that same thing. With I just kind of dwell on. I just want to go back to, well, not back, but to the March for Lives things. All these kids calling for gun restrictions, this, that, and other. I mean, one of those little kids is calling for an outright ban on all semi-automatic weapons, period, and that'll stop all the murders. Well, go talk to London. They got more, fatalities, more homicides by knife than we have with guns in New York City. They just don't get it, their kids or whatever. But there's just like sensationalism over every little thing that happens. Not that it was real little, that 17 people got shot at that school, but in the bigger picture of things, it was insignificant. It was nothing. What was the last stat I heard? I don't know. It's like 11 or 17 kids get killed a day in a car wreck because they're texting on their damn phone. They're not protesting that, but you get people riled up about little stuff and they can make things happen. I don't even know where I'm going with this now. I've been watching the side chat over there and got all twisted up.
I love your honesty, man. I love that. I just bullshit my way right through that.
All right. Well, I tell you what. Let me change gears for a minute. Let's. It's still kind of serious, but let's get off politics for a minute. Had a buddy of mine sent me a text asking me about this website. Have you checked it out? And I was like, I've never heard of it. Have any of you heard about Social Blade?
Yes.
Okay, you know about it.
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up because he was looking at all my stats and stuff. It kind of threw me off to start with. I was like, how in the hell they got all my analytics? Anybody that has a YouTube page, if you go to Social Blade, I'm assuming .com, I forget now, look up your channel name, and it'll give you the stats of some of your analytics. But if you really look at it, it's just stuff that's public anyway. But they've got it broke down. How many views you got a day, how many subs you gained, how many subs you lost, how many minutes was watched. But it don't get too far. It's not the full analytics that we get to see of our own channel. But it just kind of threw me off guard there for a minute. I was just like, the hell, this is public information. But, you know, like I said, it's really just minutes watched, viewers, that kind of thing. But it did kind of throw me a little curveball. It caught me off guard when I first seen it. And then I kept digging, and I was like, well, it's pretty much public. You know how many views I got. You know how many comments I got and stuff like that. But it's like they were able to take, either they did their own math on it, or they're able, or Google shared a little bit of your analytics with them. I just thought it was kind of weird. I don't know.
Well, I think I've never heard of it, but I mean, now you've intrigued me certainly. But yeah, it's probably a program or something like that, I would suggest. And it's like, what's the purpose of it though? I mean, is it advertising or is it just?
Well, they're trying to help people build YouTube channels, and there's a few buttons to hit that takes you. It seems like there's even like, I forget now, but a couple of buttons you can hit, and it'll, like, if you're trying to start a YouTube channel, and it gives you a rating and the people that are close to you, how you rank in YouTube overall, how your channel's growing, what you're projected. You know, there's kind of like promoting, trying to, I'm sure there's some kind of fee if you got into it deep enough to help you with your YouTube channel, and they're showing examples. But you can look up any YouTube channel and see some of the analytics of it. Hey, Patch, what's up?
Another marketing strategy, I guess. Hey, Patch, what's up, buddy?
It just kind of caught me off guard when my buddy sent me that, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I just want to go down this and see how different things are in the 1920s. And this is the last thing I'll say on the economic stuff. When we talk about a service economy, should we be nervous in this country when we look at the market capitalization? In other words, what's the high value public corporations in the United States, and you look at the list of them, and you go down. Apple, do they produce something? Yes, they do. They produce some products. So I'll give them that. They do software. But you look at Google, number two, do they really produce anything in this country? No. They're manipulators of data, and they provide social platforms for search and other things. Number three, Microsoft. Microsoft's whole reason for being is just to allow for efficiency within the system. Do they really create anything? Not really. They help the system run better. You have Amazon. Do they really make anything? No, they're distributors of product. You know, and you go right on down the group Facebook. Do they really produce anything? And you get the point that I'm saying. Between those five companies, you probably have half of the market capitalization of the United States stock market down there. And yet these companies aren't really producing anything except efficientizing a system, making it more effective and more efficient. But at the end of the day, you need to also be producing shit in an economy besides just manipulating things and providing data. You need to actually get a product out there and on the shelves and people buying something. So this is a big switch compared to the industrialization of the 1920s through the 1960s, when our corporations were dominated by General Electrics and AT&T and the huge manufacturing arms of Western Electric and Bethlehem Steel and the shipbuilding industries here, the textile industries that we had here were absolutely enormous in scale. The industrial Midwest, Ohio, with manufacturing tires, automotive. Now look at our list of quote success in our country, and it's you know, is there anything really there? They're profitable, but is it the way to build an economy for everybody? Nice to see you, Patch, by the way.
What's up, brothers and sisters? Yeah, I agree with you completely. Luke and I were talking about this last night. You know, well, he was in the conversation with Bitcoin. Nothing behind it. It's a bubble. It's the same thing they did when they were doing the penny stocks. Overinflate the price. Guys are selling it, make all the money. When it dies, some people go to jail, some people pay a fine, but by and large, the majority of the people selling the nonsense that doesn't exist, they're the ones that make all the money and bilk out the people that are buying it. So I completely agree with you. A lot of companies now don't build anything. They don't make anything. They make digital data that people are buying. Even now, if you look at video games, look at online games, what's their biggest profit? What's their biggest market share? The loot crate, which is completely electronic or digitized merchandise that you can't take with you. Facebook, you can buy stupid things on Facebook to send people that are just digitized, stickers you can buy.
So that's what I'm talking about, Patch. We've developed this cult of leisure that flies in the face of traditional capitalism, doesn't really allow for a huge fringe of luxury in it. It has a small fringe, but capitalism runs into major problems when you try to elevate the great masses of people to a leisure class. Then all of a sudden you have a pyramid that's upside down with a total absence of productivity on the bottom of the pyramid, the point, and then a lot of people being sustained through this country with deficit borrowing and debt piling up to try to sustain that. So, the economy rebuilds itself when people stop getting a free ride, and that'll take some time for that to work through.
Well, building an entertainment industry that's huge. We're being entertained, and to some regards, maybe that's what the idea is. And then when the bottom does drop out, everybody's just gonna be fucking shocked because just be like, well, what the hell? When the lights go out, so to speak. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden the zombies come out and go, what's going on? It's so bright outside. You know what I mean? And
you're right, Luke. But just remember, entertainment is a luxury in the economy. It's not a necessity. And that stuff can be pulled back very rapidly when your shit hits the fan and money gets tight. Then all of a sudden you'd be surprised how much you can do without in life. One less concert, one less movie, one less Grand Theft Auto 6, the next edition or whatever. You'd be surprised.
Well, pretty much not everything, but anything in the service industry to a point, or maybe all, but up to at least most of it is a luxury.
Absolutely.
If you're paying for a service, you're paying for something that you either didn't want to do or you couldn't do or whatever, but it's not necessarily food on the table.
Absolutely. Bingo. That's the whole point, is that sector thrives because there's an overabundance of money that's coming from somewhere in the system, and it's not coming from productive output in this country. It's coming from people being subsidized in their way of life that are not really entitled to the funds that they're spending to get that entertainment. And when that goes, that can go very quickly. So I would definitely agree with you. Most services are definitely a luxury in an economy.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, I don't deny that one single bit. I would say it's very dangerous. But is it the sign of the end to come? To one sense. Look, I mean, up in Canada, we're sitting there going, "Why the big push on legalization of marijuana, for instance?" And I said, "Well, it's probably a sign that they're reaching at straws." Canada's going, "Well, look, we got to start bringing in something. You know what I mean? Somewhere." And that's it. So it's like, let's go to the marijuana industry. Look, we've been fighting it, spending how much money fighting it. So let's spend some money to regulate it, and we'll start to get a pushback on it. Not in the beginning, but in the end. And
yeah, exactly.
Maybe we'll medicate the people. So maybe it won't be as bad. I don't know.
You're 100% correct. I mean, look at why do you think gambling was such a outlawed thing in this nation until Nevada in the 1930s? Because it doesn't really add anything to the economy. All it does is shift money from mostly those that can't really afford it to those that build up casinos and things like that. So they were smart when they didn't allow a lot of casino gambling. You had a basic horse racing industry in a few states, but basically they were smart enough to realize that gaming, they called gaming, but gambling in my day, it's almost like recreational drug use. And that, yeah, they figured out, well, let's legalize casinos, and at least we'll make some of the money off of that. Well, you're just shooting yourself in the foot in the long term by raising people to start to have a gambling mentality. And we've seen it in our own community here on YouTube, buying scratch off tickets when you have no money in your pocket, and just stupid decisions that people make because they're allowed to make those decisions. So yeah, you have a very good point about, well, let's tax it and make some money off of it anyway. Well, it's taking it off the backs of the people, that's for sure.
I have to disagree with Nick. Go ahead, Brother TR, sorry.
There was a comment out there. He's probably going to say the same thing or talk about the same thing about, if you go without entertainment for a year, you'll, lose your mind or whatever. And that's true. You know what? We as humans, we need entertainment. But when I was a kid, we would go outside and play with sticks and make them pick out the ones that look like guns, and we'd play war, cowboys and Indians, whatever. Yep. As an adult, I can read a book. I can play chess with a friend. I mean, yes, we have to be entertained. We have to entertain ourselves, but we don't have to pay for it.
That's I was just going to say,
money gets high, you'll do the other route. Right.
I was going to say, Meth, you're wrong. Entertainment's not a need. We've been conditioned to make it a need. As TR was just saying, I could think of 10 things to do right now that'll keep me entertained, if we're going to use that word, that doesn't cost a dime.
Well,
and I don't need it.
Patch. You look at a base economy like China, communist from 1949 to 1999. Basically, you think those people were consuming entertainment? Fuck no. The entertainment was the Chairman Mao annual parade down your local main street. And you better be out there waving that flag high, man, and you better be stepping right. There's, entertainment's a luxury of societies. It's something that we take as kind of a birthright because we do have a well-developed entertainment industry here. But my goodness, let's not forget how much of the world there's zero entertainment except where the next meal is going to be coming from. If we have a few
crickets at night. See, the problem with entertainment here in this country, especially, and Luke and I have talked about this a lot. We have the 3 to 5 minute attention span. Why? Because everything we get, all of our entertainment comes in 3 to 5 minute spurts, with the exception of the occasional movie we might watch. We've been so conditioned to be plugged into everything and to try and know everything that's going on within the first 10 minutes after everything's happened that, everybody thinks this is a need. If we get hit with an EMP, there'd be a lot of people jumping off of bridges and buildings because they can't go without their iPads, iPhones, and laptops.
There's no doubt about that. Trust me, I see people who forget their cell phone somewhere and they're fucking stupid without them. Me, I'm still not at that point yet, which I'm glad, but you feel it.
You're mean, Pat. You're mean. You're mean.
What was that, Miss Rosie? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
You're mean. You're mean.
I know I'm mean, but I'm just being honest.
Well, I can still pick up a book and read it. So I still remember the feel of a book in my hand. Something a lot of kids don't know these days. So
yeah, they got Kindles. If they read.
They have audio on book. They have audio books now. You don't even have to friggin' read. You can just sit and listen to somebody else read the damn story to you. It's like, what the hell? It's crazy.
I mean, I still pay for entertainment. I go see a movie here and there. I pay for internet service so I can have YouTube and Facebook and things like that. But at the same time, I also cut my cable off. I have no TV. My HD antenna broke. When I say I have no TV, I have no TV. And I hadn't replaced that antenna. It's been broke for about a year. I mean, but there again, I can watch news shows and different things on TV anyway. I mean, on the internet. But
that's how I do it. Everything's online. I don't have regular cable. I have internet and a landline phone in the house, just in case, because I'm prone to forgetting to charge my phone for days on end. So I could sit here being dead and I won't know it, and then I'll have to look at my phone and go, oh, well, hell, it's dead. I'll charge it. So you got to call me, you get the house number.
I'm the same boat. I mean, and I wonder how many people have actually gone that way. We have a landline, right? I do have a cellular device, certainly, so I can be reached outside of the home. But, and again, we only have the internet, right? We don't have satellite. We don't have cable. You know what I mean? We cut ties to that a long time ago. And you know what? And I'm not even so sure I can be honest. I can be honest, I should say, I guess, and tell you that I don't think it was so much as a choice. It was I was forced to do it. I had to, because I really couldn't afford those other luxuries. You know what I mean? And you know, on the backside of it, I said, well, it only makes sense, because I said to my wife, I said, look, we can get everything we really need truly through the internet, right? We get Netflix, we get Amazon Prime, or whatever the hell it is. We have choices in that sense, and it'll cost us a fraction of what, you know, the cable and satellite was costing us. We have a basic home phone plan, and I have a basic, well, semi-basic, I guess, cell phone plan. But I'm taken care of in that sense. So, and the family's happy, and we don't know any different, really. You know, just like TR said, want to watch a movie, get relatively new movies, and there's pirated stuff as well, of course. Not that I do that, ladies and gentlemen. Just to let you know, I don't break the law, nevertheless.
Wait, what about those movies you sent me the other day?
The XD on the UV, May, eh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had myself muted. I hope I wasn't popping up, banging on my keyboard. I had a question out there. I'm just going to, I mean, it's a little change subject anyway. What's your opinion on solar panels? Do you think they're a good investment or not? I think they're a good investment depending on your location, depending on how much sun you get. I live on the shady side of a small little mountain or a hill, depending on where you live. And to be honest, they really didn't work out for me. I mean, I got power from them, but the amount I invested in them, then the total investment that I put into them really wasn't that cost effective. I kind of gave up on it, to be honest with you. It was a hobby. It's like once I got into it, I wanted more and more and more. I was trying to overcome how shady where I live is. I live in the woods on the wrong side of the hill. I get very little sunlight for just a few hours a day, and it didn't work out for me. But if you get a lot of sun, it is a good investment. I just throwing that out there.
Well, if anything, I'd say at least the knowledge was an immense investment, right? Because if, let's just say, you know, the bottom drops out and the lights go out, well, I mean, that knowledge could give you something anyway.
Oh, yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I
don't
mean?
get me wrong. Even where I live in my house and all that, if the lights went off, I could produce power. I do produce power. You know, it wouldn't be 24/7. I don't get enough to, you know, just run stuff all day long, all night long. But yeah, I could run a refrigerator here and there, and I can, from a prepping standpoint, what I have will work. You know, because in that situation, whether it's natural disaster or whatever, short term, long term, whatever, I could still produce power. I can, no doubt. So yeah.
Yeah. It's money well spent on it. Anytime you can get knowledge, you know what I mean? And if you've dabbled in it and get a little bit of supplies to go along with that knowledge, I mean, your league's ahead as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah.
Yeah, like Stan was talking, Stan said added a wind turbine. See, there again, I can't even do a wind turbine. I'd have to have a tower over 100 feet tall. Yeah.
Well,
Because I'm in a hole. I literally in a hole. I got 5 acres of land and just enough land cut out for my home in a little bitty yard. I mean, there's trees just 100 foot tall all around my house. And I live on the shady side. And as far as wind, I just don't get it. You know, and I don't have water, so I can't do hydropower, which is the best way to go. If you got a creek or river, hydro is the way to go. So, anyway.
It means water, Luke, not electricity.
Which turns into what? Oh, electricity. Yeah, that's right. So that's why we say hydro up here. Sunset. Anyway.
Oh, dear. We have a ton of solar panels here. Most of the apartment complexes here have all got some sort of subsidy from the state to have solar panels. So, but we always get a lot of sun. You know, I can count on one hand how many times it rains in my part of California a year. I can count on one hand. It won't rain for the next 6 months.
Time to move. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a lot. That's not good. No wonder you're running out of water.
We get a rainy season and a dry season, so we won't have rain till December now. So I like it myself. So we get enough in the winter time. I don't have to. We send it down to where Patch is.
Very true. Very true. Very true. Yeah, I was like, my wife was saying this year, where the hell was our winter? It hardly rained. And I was like, I don't know. And all of a sudden it got cold and it rained a few days and now it's just dry again. Looks like it's going to rain. It doesn't rain. Just think, no, screw you in rain. I keep saying they got to desalinate the ocean. You know, we got a lot of that here so they can desalinate, but I keep saying it just costs too much to do that.
A lot of rain here in the south. I mean, maybe not as much as some other areas, but at least we ain't getting snow. Like they've been getting up north.
Glad about that. Yeah, Deb, once the sun came, the marine layer didn't burn off till about 1 o'clock. And then we had some nice sun till about 6 or so. So it got up to about 75, 76 degrees.
Yeah, for everybody up north, Stan and whoever else is up there, I'm sorry, it's global warming. Gore warned us about global warming, and here it is. Blizzards in April.
Yeah, what a prick.
You're not looking at it right. See, it was global warming, and then all the ice caps melt, and then it stopped that big freaking generator in the ocean, and all of a sudden it stops. And now everything's going to start to freeze. See, so it's we didn't heed his warning, so now it's past that now, right? So it's actually going. We're already leaving global warming now, and turning out what the result of the global warming was, all right? So I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when Charles Dickens was writing his novels in the 1840s and stuff, they had a mini ice age in UK. It wasn't common to have very bitter winters with heavy snows, and you do get these cycles of. We could definitely be coming into a cooling period here.
Oh, if anything, we're headed toward a cooling off, no doubt. I mean, I believe that. Don't get me wrong. I don't.
In colonial times, they had
climate change. It was like, well, no shit. Our climate always changed. I mean, look at Earth's history.
I mean, in colonial times, they had snow in June in some of the country, so it's not that unusual.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and I'm with TR in that sense that I think it is. It's a global cycle, and I think it is a cycle that we can track back when you start looking at ice core samples, for instance. I mean, it was a really good indicator of that. You can see some of these trends that were playing out, and then, of course, duplicating to some degree and finding little cycles. Now, as the bigger cycle, I don't know. Maybe we're not able to track that as well. You know, I mean, a bigger cycle, but these mini cycles, it would probably be tracking and say, okay, so is there some kind of pattern to it? I don't necessarily believe in global warming, but I do believe in is climate shift, right? In the sense that it's, you know, and it could be even just the world shifting just that touch. I mean, we certainly have talked about this before. Well, maybe not here, but about the North Pole basically moving in a sense. So, I mean, if that moves, just enough to basically all of a sudden now we get that warm spot hitting the freaking ice caps and the melt, it will repeat itself, right? And sure, it could be very devastating. And then we here in the North will certainly come down and say, hey, TR, you seem to have a little yard, but it's still big enough for me and my family to pitch a tent. You okay with that? Because it's awfully cold up north.
Yeah, there's room for a tent.
Well, the weather nuts, they do say you know, we tend to look at our own area and extrapolate what's going on with the rest of the world. So I think on average it's still probably warmer globally, but it's certainly been a cool winter. I mean, I couldn't believe we're still getting snow up. I mean, there's snow somewhere coming in New England this weekend, I think. So when we're almost touching in May.
Well, like the prime example I use all the time when they talk about when people want to talk about climate change is the eastern coast. I don't know where it was on the west coast, but on the eastern coast, halfway up the state of South Carolina is Columbia, where our capital is. That used to be the beach. So the ice caps had melted off a good bit. The oceans had risen. You can go to Columbia, halfway down South Carolina, halfway down North Carolina, any state up the eastern seaboard, 100, 200 miles, whatever it is, probably 150 miles, whatever. And you can find seashells just on the side of the road, wherever. If you dig up some dirt, there's sand and seashells. Man wasn't even here then. So it wasn't freaking SUVs. It wasn't coal mine or coal powered, energy plants. It's just our earth changes. And one of the, I don't know if you want to call it the best or worst or most stupidest thing I ever heard, when all the really, really big climate change talks were going on, a scientist, one of the bigger ones, I don't know the name, don't remember, was literally asked, well, what about the sun's activity affecting Earth? And he literally said, the sun has nothing to do with the climate on Earth. It's like, what? It's
but
like,
the problem,
well, through talking to you, because there's no there's no way to have a conversation with you.
no, that's it. But here's the thing, though. It's because he's got a couple letters behind his name, or a whole slew of them, and he's on TV, and he sounds important, and the platform that he came from or appeared on was important. And fucking damn be right, there's going to be a shit ton of people. They're going to follow that and say, "Oh yeah, that's dangerous. That guy sounds important." No, listen. I heard this guy on TV, and it's true. He's there, and he said it. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, it's like, okay, did you check on what he said at all? It's like, well, what do you mean check on it? It's like, well, he's already done the research. He's telling you that there's countless papers on it and so on and so on. People don't know really. You know what I mean? They don't really know. Fucking Facebook is so infamous for this. You get a sad story on Facebook. And I love my wife. I love her dearly. However, she says to me, look at this shit. Look at this shit here. Look here. And I read it and I go, I go, wow, it's probably not real. And she goes, what do you mean it's not real? It's right there. And I'm like, yes, so what? I could write this sad, sappy story here that sounds terrible. You know what I mean? And basically, I'm looking for everybody. I'll tell you what. Look, just go to Google here and I'll type this in. There you go. Look, it's just a hoax. It's just a story circulating on Facebook. It's not real. Well, fuck, it sounded so real. Time after time, we have this conversation. It usually ends up somewhere along the lines, I'm an asshole. I don't know why, because I'm right, I guess.
At least she knows you are.
Yeah, well, that's it. But I mean, this is it though, and I just well, there it is. I just made my point once again. You know what I mean? And these same people who share this, they can go share this everywhere. It's such a fucking tragedy, and so on. They haven't checked it, but these are the same people that stumble into a voting booth. And I go back to your original video, sir, and I say, maybe we shouldn't put too much stock in it, because I mean, Jesus, 60% of the population probably shouldn't get into a voting booth because they're making decisions for all of us, and the others think it's really good, you know. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I was having a conversation. It's been several months ago with somebody who was more on the liberal side, and I think we were talking about Trump anyway, and because he's constantly being called a racist, misogynist, blah, 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 blah. And, and I ain't saying Trump's perfect, don't get me wrong. But anyway, and I was like, well, what are you talking about? Or whatever the subject was. And she did like a quick search on her phone. We was at work. And, and there was all these headlines. And it was like, have you read any of them? And she's like, well, no, but see here, see, there's proof. He's this, and this. And I was like, well, that's just the headline of the story. I said, you know, this, and a few of them I knew about. And I was like, well, that was disproven and that was false and blah, blah, blah. I said, click on the story, read the story, see who the source is, blah, blah, blah. And I made this point maybe on the chat or something. It's like, I think I don't even think. I mean, I pretty much got it figured out. Sensationalized headlines, if that's what hits your Google feed or whatever else search engine you use, people will read the headline, take that as fact, and not even read the freaking story.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it could be complete polar opposite, but they've said it in almost a condescending manner to grab your attention. You know what I mean? And do that. There was an example. I seen it, and I showed my wife, and I said, "See this here? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You see the title of this? Now you read the body of the story, and it has nothing to do with that. But if a person just reads that or takes that 2 fucking seconds or that 2 minutes of information and run with it, it's like stats. When people put stats out there, you go, yeah, it definitely looks like U.S. is responsible for this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, it looks like U.S. has the biggest gun problem. Now let's take all of the countries and put them into the graph, and you go, well, what the hell is those other big lines that are way bigger than the United States? It's like, yeah, exactly. They just didn't give you all the information. They didn't lie to you. They just didn't give you the whole story. What they told you was, out of these countries, U.S. is the largest, but it's not all the information, and nobody wants to do that work, right? And I spend most of my time double checking shit. You know what I mean? I wish I could just actually take what I read and say, okay, I'm good. I'm done with that.
Well, Luke, you hit on the whole problem we've talked about for a couple of years is, what do people believe anymore in this country? And it drives it hard. It's too much to get into tonight, but I really think it's worthy of a whole hangout, because it's what split and polarized and fractured this nation is. We used to use information as a source to educate and try to understand. Now we use news and fake news as a way to justify our preconceived positions on things. They wonder why people in Congress can't really get along anymore, because everybody takes their position based on the news feed that they like. You know, some people like CNN, some people like Fox News, some people like all the different internet, Young Turks, all the different they'll find a news feed that reinforces their own way of thinking, and they will not open, their minds will not be open. They won't even be subject to other thought. This is far different than before social media and the internet brought all of fractured news from just the big three, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Now it's like you can pick whatever you want to be your source, and you pick something that fits your philosophy. You don't make your philosophy based on what you hear anymore. It's like there's been this dramatic reversal. The implications, I think, still have to be played out in this. We're just being splintered a zillion different ways here, and we're turning on each other.
Yeah, I agree. I've said this, I guess, was probably a show was on with Patch there. And I said that in the sense that it's there's so much diversity in everything. I mean, not just in our population in itself, but our ideals. I mean, me and TR, Patch, yourself, certainly, we could all be friends, all have a general idea of what we all on the same side of our thinking, but certainly there's something that we absolutely disagree on. Right? There's times when we find them and sometimes we don't. But you're right in that sense that if there's a million things being thrown at a person, so you almost can't help to have 2 minutes or less information.
We can become tribal now with our beliefs. We can split into fractured tribes of our own belief system. So, and it's very difficult it's very difficult to reconcile with other tribes or share information or have a new synthesis come out of that. This is my understanding, what I see going on.
Well, what I see might be a little bit more insidious. It's not just that people don't want to do the work. A lot of times they make it so other people don't do the work, so it moves their narrative. When you look at BLM, for instance, you know, the hands up, don't shoot narrative. Nobody wanted anybody to do any research on what actually happened with Michael Brown. They wanted to just run with that narrative. Dude was, you know, giving up and had his hands up, and then the cops shot him all those times. Until forensic evidence and witness testimony stated specifically, no, that's not the case. That's not what happened. He wasn't surrendering. He was running, trying to bum rush the cop. Even now to this day, people still say that those black people that gave testimony for the grand jury said, you know, they didn't say what they said, or they were paid off to say that he was going to, you know, give up. And they're still the BLM movement is still predicated on a lie, and they're still regurgitating that lie on purpose, so it fits their agenda. So it's not just people are too lazy to do the work; they're not given enough information or being steered away from the information that would make it easier for them to do the research. As Luke knows, I tend to research things before I speak about them because I don't like being wrong. And I like when I do a show with Luke and with Angel and TR and Rosie, I want to have my facts. That way, you know, they can say, yeah, Patches and moron. What the hell is he talking about? But yeah, it's not, I don't think it's just that people are lazy. I think it's an insidious ploy to make people be divergent on their ideologies for the simple fact that they want people apart. If you come together, there's strength in numbers. If you're pushed apart, it's easier to baffle, swindle, and take over. But that's right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, there was such thing as an algorithm, so to speak, but in a more primitive form, even back in newspapers. People printed what people, you know what I mean, that basically drawn the people to it. Well, they could even decide. People just kind of, you know, went along with it, certainly. But kind of like Rosie said, there was only like, you know, 3 major networks at one point. So now the dangerous part about this course, and that furthers that uneducation, you know what I mean, is the aspect that the algorithms just keep feeding to what it is that you want to hear. Right. So you don't even have to chase it. It now comes to you. And YouTube is infamous for this, certainly. My Google feed, my Google News that I sit and I look at in the morning, I check through it. Right. And it was like, fuck, there is shitloads going on about North Korea. But then all of a sudden it just dawned on me. I'm sitting there going, hang on a second. It's because my algorithms basically understand I want to read it because I've clicked on it. Yes. And so it just keeps throwing me North Korea. So meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking, oh, it's ramping up, it's ramping up, it's ramping up. But meanwhile, no, it's just that I'm getting every single news agency that's reporting on that from a little slightly different angle, or something that maybe the last one didn't have, you know, or they didn't report on because it just wasn't, they had something better and they've only got so much space or time or whatever the case is.
You don't have the ability to weigh importance of news and things anymore, but you tribalize on your own feed. And I'm telling the side chat, I'm not talking tribal in the sense of Indian tribes. I'm talking tribal in the sense of people with a shared interest and shared beliefs. That's what I'm talking about, because it used to basically come down to liberal or conservatism. Now it comes down to a lot of different supremacists, all the way down to anarchists, all the way down to libertarian. I mean, there's so many different ways that people lead with their, you know, gun advocates lead with that. Equal pay for women, they lead with that. I mean, there's so many different, you know, we're losing that ability to hear any other input because we're like Luke said, we're saturating our own feed with our interests and what reinforces us, and we say, yeah, fuck yeah, there we go. I told you, there's another case of it, and there's another case, and there's another news story that supports that. So this is what I worry about. You know, that we're kind of losing our ability to communicate and sort of persuade people, and you know, because we have our own feeds to use as swords in our fights, and I think it's taken a toll on people. Just don't know really what to believe anymore, what's factually correct. And we had the whole rise of fake news because of that you could put anything out there and it would be believable, because the credibility. You know, who's to say it's not a credible person? I mean, the internet made everybody a reporter, right? Anybody could start up a blog. Anybody could spout off whatever they want. And you know.
Let me ask you this question, Rosie, and going along with that idea, what maybe I'm wrong, so I'm going to ask you about this in the United States here. Was there much talk about your debt this past election, getting Trump in? was there much really debate or talk about the debt?
No.
And I found that so strange because this is what I thought. I said to my wife, I said, it's so strange because it didn't like it was. I heard nothing about it, and even in the State of the Union address, I'm like, did I miss something? But it didn't seem like it was a really big talking point. I'm thinking this is fucking huge. So why would they not talk about that or address it? And I think, well, maybe it's because there's just no point. They can't fix this. And going, well, shit. If that's the case, well, we're in serious trouble. The other point I wanted to make was this. Going along with that point. Is there more bullshit points that are brought up as an election on election platforms, like abortion? I'm not suggesting it's not important, but it's not fucking important. This is not something that a president should be fucking running on. You know what I mean? There's just so many more things that they should be running on. So is there more of that shit going on? Filler.
We kind of yahooed our presidential election in a lot of ways about who's doing the gaffe of the day and what came out of Hillary's pants and what the blue glasses are and Trump's comb over. I mean, we tended, we're not as serious, I think, about things as maybe they are in parliamentarian sort of countries like Canada about things. And our news holds, like I say, the news, if you want to take an entertainment angle on politics, you can just follow Yahoo News. If you want a more serious angle, you can come on to chats like TRs and Patches, and they will talk the important things. They will talk to you. Guns was a big thing. That was a big driver. Hillary's going to take away the guns when she gets in. And what were some of the other ones, Pat? Some of the other big drivers were world leadership. Who has stature in the world, and who's going to make trade right, and who's going to make fair trade, free trade, fair trade, and they seem to be the dominant issue.
Who is supposedly going to keep globalism from happening? That was one of the big ones in this last election.
Yeah.
Trump ran on a position of screw globalists, America first. Hillary was all in bed with all the major power players in the world.
Yeah, I think Trump said people in Paris don't elect me; people in the United States do. So
exactly.
I mean,
it's hard blood. You're wrong, dude. You're wrong. You cannot name me one truly socialistic country that has ever worked. Socialism is not even a good idea. Gone misapplied. Socialism is a bad idea. When you take from me to give to, say, Luke, who's working a different job, making less money, because I'm making good money working a tech job and Luke is working construction, there's no way in hell you're going to tell me take it from me to give to Luke so we can have equality of outcome as opposed to equality of opportunity is the way to go.
Socialism just rewards a lack of initiative. That's all socialism.
Exactly.
It blunts initiative. What's the point if you're not going to get any better than anybody else? What's the point in having a great idea? Fuck it. You're not going to get rewarded for it. You want a system that rewards insight and innovation, no matter how outlandish the rewards are. You look at Bill Gates, he didn't really create anything. He was just smart enough to recognize a great operating system and bought it and commercialized it. That was his big insight. So, you're not going to get that in socialist economies. You're not going to have that drive to be innovative and to get your just rewards. That's the flaw of socialism.
We have a brainwashed person in the comment section. I'm sorry if that insults you, blood out there, but holy shit, you're brainwashed as hell. You have not done any research or education of yourself.
But it's nice to have some dissent. It's nice to hear some alternative.
I'm not a fan.
At least we can argue it. Capitalism rewards innovation better than any other system in the history of mankind. Period.
You know why that's true, Rosie? It's because every other branch form of government knows that they have to have capitalism as an underlying in order to go with their socialistic or communistic programs. Yep. Even Russia's communist.
Yeah, you're just saying it's an overlay over capitalism, which is correct. Somebody has to be producing something down there. We can't all sit around reading poetry under the fig tree.
The only thing that I know of, and I'm sure there's been inventions, don't get me wrong, But far as a communist country, the one thing that was invented in a communist country that was very successful, probably didn't make him hardly any money, was the AK-47 was developed and invented in a communist country.
That's a rarity. Otherwise, communism, equal misery for all.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I got bread on the line.
Exactly.
I
was just gonna. I thought you were going there with that, TR. I thought you were gonna say, the most important thing that socialism built was the bread line. That's look at Venezuela. Look, it's just Brazil. I mean, come on.
They're eating their damn pets in Venezuela right now.
Well, I just
they're eating their dogs and cats.
Like Linda said, the market economy is imperfect, but it's most consistent with liberty. It's also most consistent with the human condition, where we have infinite wants and desires, and capitalism is the only system that allows us unfettered means to pursue. Whether we fail or succeed, at least we have the right and the ability to try. And therefore, a lot of innovation and advancement comes out of that. You're not going to get that out of communist and socialist countries. They're too busy about equaling up the chips on the table as opposed to bringing new chips into the game.
Well, see, blood out there. I hate
just said Venezuela's not socialist.
It's like, oh, that's not socialism. That's not communism. Yes, it is.
Oh my God! Let me go to Blood's channel real quick here.
I just did some homework there. It was kind of like somebody else on G's chat the other night. I had to go check the channel out.
That blues person, yeah.
Yeah. Once I went to the channel, I went, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay.
There we go. And now I just did the same thing. Yeah, what all?
Okay, he's got girly battle food recipes, desert farming. Okay, it's got the whole schmear there.
Wait, he doesn't have the Anunnaki and the Nibiru?
No, but I don't know. I don't think so. But
the Flat Earth Society.
I think there is something to do with summoning demons, though. So that's kind of cool. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Blood. I'm not being a very nice guy.
We're all living on an upside down iron there, Patch.
Oh dear God! I had somebody last night when I did the show last night trying to tell me, "Oh, the world is round, but we got extra land." I'm like, "How the hell do you have extra land in a round Earth? Oh, we got walls." I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I was like, "Oh dear God in heaven!" It's like I had to start twitching. I thought my brain was going to have an embolism.
I thought your brain was going to explode.
I know we're running a little bit long here. Probably at 2 hours. But I had somebody. This is just my personal opinion. See what you people think. But anyway, here on Facebook lately, this one person was like always liking and commenting on all my posts, no matter what I did. It was, there. And it's like, well, I appreciate it, And then I posted something anti-flat earth just because for the hell of it here and there. And they made this long comment, and I just flat out just like ripped into their ass. Like, look, if you believe the earth is flat, don't you ever comment. Don't you ever like my shit. Ever. Just go away. I ain't heard from them since. Because like I was telling somebody, it's like, well, if this is the people that look at what I'm doing and people that believe in flat earth are agreeing with me, well, that just killed every bit of legitimacy that my argument had.
That's right.
He's out there getting his asshole patched up. No wonder he ain't around.
I had somebody on Facebook, similar instance or situation, TR. This person I've known for like 5 or 6 years, and I didn't realize how much of a card-carrying flat earth liberal they were. And so one day I started seeing messages about, if you don't believe the earth is flat, then you can fuck right off. I'm like, wait, hold up. That's my alley. I'm like, really? So I started playing with them, and they started talking about the Van Allen radiation belt. They started talking about this. I'm like, you do realize you're an idiot, right? He's like, I should go drink poison since I don't believe the earth is flat. I'm like, no, I'll just wait for you to jump off the tip of the earth and then tell me what happens.
Yeah, report back.
Yeah, give me a report back after you do it.
Ground control to Major Loon.
If I look at, and I consider myself pretty much a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I'll look at anything and everything, but the flat Earth thing has blown my mind. I'm like, oh my God, are you serious?
See you later, Coach. Take care.
But anyway, I mean, I hate to even bring that up. We ain't got time to talk about that. But all I can say is I've flown over halfway across the Earth, and I'm positive it's fucking round.
Amen. I couldn't agree with you more, brother. Just like I couldn't agree with you more that socialism and communism just equal, misery for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, fuck all that. No, that's okay. I'll stick with my capitalism. It ain't perfect, but nothing that a human being is going to do is going to be perfect because we ain't perfect as individuals. So I'll stick with my communism. It's my capitalism. It's okay. I like having communism as an enemy. It works for me. Been doing it all my life. I don't want to start anything new now. I'm too old.
Yeah, you wonder in the absence of social networking and everybody being a reporter and everybody having a say-so, you wonder how things like flat earthers come into existence. Well, there you go, because there's a stream built for them, and it's very easy to. It's a case in point. We wouldn't have had this conversation in 1965. It would have been impossible to have such a stupid conversation. But now all of a sudden, we're devolving as people. I'm telling you, we can even consider the notion of having a flat Earth. Just shows how ridiculously bad people are being informed these days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's anarchy. Forget about anarchy. You know what I mean? Go read the history of anarchy.
You know what? I was thinking that was an anarchist, but I don't understand why they were so adamant about how socialism and communism is a good thing, but you're an anarchist. What the fuck?
Yeah,
that never makes any sense to me when they're talking about anarchy and they're talking about socialism. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? One is chaos theory, and the other one is almost complete control.
Yeah, it's like Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, the worst of times. Come on, man, make up your fucking mind. Which is it?
Yeah, really?
Anarchy, socialism,
Yeah, okay, but he says instead of making shit up about us, who is us? Explain yourself. Please don't have a repeat of the other
I
night.
guarantee you, me and Luke have had many, many conversations with anarchists.
Well, you come on panel up with us and inform us, and I'll be polite. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, let me try to sum it up in a really, really quick because we're getting late. No matter what type of group of people you get together, you always have a leader. You always have leadership. You always end up. There is no such thing as pure anarchy. You will end up with a government, whether you want it or not, because you will have leaders. You will have a council. You know what all that is? That's a fucking government. Yep. So don't ever come to me arguing that anarchy is the way to go, blah, blah, because we don't have government. We govern each other. That's what a fucking government is. That's what we have now.
So go read Lord of the Flies, okay? Learn something.
You can't have a church. You can't have a scout group. You can't even have a party. You can't have a bachelor party without somebody being the leader. This kind of putting
somebody got to pay for it.
Something some way.
Yeah, go read Lord of the Flies. That'll be an eye opener for you.
Even if you go with a complete chaos theory type of situation, where everybody's doing their own thing, what ends up happening is the strong will subjugate the weak, just so the strong ain't got to do jack shit and make the weak do it. Period. That's tribalism at its worst.
That's human history. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you end up having to have rules or laws. I mean, if you have pure anarchy, that means your neighbor can come over and rape and kill your wife, and there's no repercussions. You say, well, no, I can take care of that. Well, there's always something going on that, well, wait a minute, we got to curb this. We just can't have complete chaos.
No,
we'll have some rules. Well, as soon as you start having rules, you got a government.
I'm sorry you deleted that message, Deb. I would have liked to have repeated that he said that anarchy communities are democratic. I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah, true democracies. That was
I
funny.
mean, you just said total opposition to what, you know. I don't know what you're smoking down there at Slab City, but I'm going to tell you what. Socialism and democracy. I mean, anarchy and democracy are about as polar opposite as you can get in life.
Yeah.
And to tell me anarchy communities are run like democracies, what the fuck? You're not an anarchy then.
Democracy is the worst form of government ever. I would rather have socialism than I would a democracy.
Yeah, fuck mob rule. Fuck mob rule.
Yeah.
No.
I am myself, you know, you have our anarchies run on a democratic principle. What the hell?
We should have started with this from the beginning. We could have had 2 hours on this.
Be my last chat. I have to resign my commission.
It's funny because we had an 8-hour chat, and this is kind of where we ended ours for the last fucking hour. Was something like this.
Did.
And this is kind of ironic, I just think. Anyways,
I think it's just you and me, Luke. It's you and me.
I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know.
Not that I'm saying the United States is perfect. We had a good plan. We fucked it up. There's no doubt. But it's still a good idea. And, you know, I believe it's up to us to try to save it. And Luke, I agree, it's probably beyond saving. Don't get me wrong.
At least we have.
But
at least we have.
As long as that chance is there, I'm going to fight to the end.
At least our system offers a potential way to do that without overthrowing the whole goddamn system. So, but it probably has to go through stages to get back to that bedrock of good old thrift, common sense, and hard work. Again, that's what real true capitalism and wealth is built on, not sucking out your money for my benefit while I sit around, read poetry under a tree and eat figs. Okay? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the Greeks tried that thousands of years ago. It didn't work very well for them. That was one of Socrates' and Plato's biggest things is, why should I do anything? I could just make people pay me to write poems. Suck off the government tit. I mean, they did that. You know, Athens was a big proponent for that.
Well, that was Karl Marx's ultimate wet dream: is the state withers away and we all sit under trees eating figs and reading poetry. Happy new world. No, God knows who's going to harvest the wheat and make the bread, but we'll have good poetry. No.
Well, it's not like you have no hope. There's still the option to come back to the crown.
Yeah, fuck that.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, but it probably would have been. That'll probably be the author. We'll all be back in England's fold anyway. So probably rule Britannia, right? So
let's just hope we're dead before that happens.
No. I only suggest it because I don't think you guys have a gun that can shoot far enough to hit me. But
please take the Queen's head off the money and currency, okay? Please.
Well, that's gotten better with age. I mean, she's aged nicely. Her hair's still nice.
Formaldehyde in the veins works wonders.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. We could go on for a long time. Hell, it seems like we're just now getting fired up. But I'm going to go ahead and try to keep this around 2 hours and end it. Just in case somebody wants to watch it later. So I'm going to go down the line and let everybody do an outro. And I'm going to start with you, Luke, my Canadian brother.
Well, and I appreciate that, brother. Like I say, I appreciate, first off, you let the Canadian in the room. I try to, I think I try to ask questions that certainly are going to, even though I'm Canadian, I'm trying to learn more. I'm always trying to learn more about my neighbors to the south, because the reality is whatever happens in the south, we are on your coattails. It's only a matter of time before we follow suit. Literally, I mean, on just about everything, or we're going to suffer just as like you guys do, maybe even more. But I think this is it. And like, certainly Rosie had said earlier, to me, this is reliable. I feel that this is reliable, and it sums up a lot of things. So I don't have to get my information in 2 minutes or less. And I feel confident that the information I'm getting is at least, it gives us an opportunity to think it through, talk it through. And I can reinforce some of the ideas that I have. So I haven't been adding in much to my channel except a couple of rants lately over on an Informed State of Mind. But but it is good, and so I do appreciate it. It was a wonderful show. Wonderful seeing you again, Rosie, certainly. And TR, thanks very much. People on the outside, like I said, it's real good to see y'all here. So great show. It really was. It was great.
Well, it's honest for sure. And I think everybody on the panel here, anybody pretty much that I can think of, if you catch us saying something that's untrue and you can, say, well, no, this happened or whatever, we'll backtrack and say, oh, I didn't know that. I mean, I definitely think these chats are very, very honest. We'll just tell you what we think, what we know, or what we think we know, and we have a conversation. So, Rosie, go ahead. You do an outro.
Thank you. Well, it was a great chat. Always enjoy being on with Luke and Patch. We mix it up. We enjoy it. Love to have you on here in TR. Hard to believe we're moving towards 3 years here. It's really hard. It's really hard to believe. And I still say you got an outstanding side chat here. We cover a lot of different topics. I think we delve into things on a really deep level, and we kind of get people thinking about things a little differently on here. We're not dyed-in-the-wool conservatives, but there is something at the core of conservatism that really resonates with the American mainstream, with capitalism, and with productive ways of life. And I really feel that this chat really highlights them, and it really brings those to light. We take a philosophical, we take an economics look at things, and we take, of course, a prepping look. So I feel like between those three things, you have a very unique chat here. Wasn't the biggest chat tonight, but I think anybody that watches this chat this week will be impressed with what we covered off here and our sort of deep core understandings of what the issues, they may not be in the mainstream, but remember, things only make the mainstream when they burst up to the surface like a volcano erupting. Then they get the attention. But we're down here sort of underneath, and we see the subterranean streams of what's going on and what's likely to burst to the surface. So thank you guys for another great night, and thank you, Side Chat.
Thanks for being on, Rosie. I always appreciate it. And we've been doing this a while. I keep thinking I need to end it, but it's like, well, we always have good conversations. We always have a good audience. It ebbs and flows, and it's bigger sometimes than others. I mean, we actually had a pretty average night tonight, and hopefully it'll continue.
Yep.
Patch, would you like to do an outro, man? Did he step away?
I might have.
It's okay.
Hope he
might be having problems. He dropped out.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks everybody for dropping by. We'll be back next week. Trying to mix it up with the panel a little bit. I know we had one person begging to be on, and I can go ahead and tell you now, if you beg to be on, you're never going to be on.
You ain't going to be on, man.
But anyway, yeah, we have always had great conversations, and we delve into things maybe you don't see on other chats, and try to keep it somewhat sane, and just the best we can. That's all we can do, is the best we can. And excuse me, I got a new computer, and my damn monitor is so freaking big. My camera's up here, so I'm looking at the screen, and you never see me looking at the camera. But anyway, a little different setup here tonight. But thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week.